Over the past 2 years, there's been a notable decline of original content for Dead by Daylight. The last truly great original additions to the game were Sable and Unknown with the All Things Wicked chapter, which released in March 2024, nearly 2 years ago now. Since then we've had the release of just 2 original killers, Houndmaster and Krasue, and 3 original survivors, Taurie, Orela, and Vee, or 2 full chapters and a half chapter. We're also seemingly getting another half chapter survivor in March 2026. These 3 additions are hardly bad, I would argue, but all have had clear issues and left us as players wanting a bit more out of them, and the original world of Dead by Daylight as a whole too, with licensed content seeming to receive far more care and attention in recent years. Let's look through the recent original chapters one by one and discuss the issues I have with them personally, as well as the original content as a whole over the past 2 years. Let's get into it. So, starting out with Doomed Course, a chapter which featured Taurie Cain and the Houndmaster, releasing in November of 2024. A chapter that certainly had a challenge on its hands, as it followed the highly praised All Things Wicked. Out the gate though, it was sort of set up to fail, with it having literally no marketing at all. The PTB just sort of rolled out one day, and oh, there's a new chapter. There was basically no preemptive hype period or anything even suggesting a chapter was even coming soon, other than the roadmap. This was really bizarre after the intense and extensive marketing for All Things Wicked, which was highly praised as well. Doomed Course got nothing. On the PTB, our first look at the Houndmaster and Taurie were decent ones, I'd say. A pirate chapter was a relatively requested one. Taurie too, as sort of an evil or morally grey survivor, had also been highly requested over the years. In writing, this chapter seems kind of fascinating. However, there were definite issues people had with the both of them. One of the initial point of contentions was actually that many didn't like the Houndmaster's depiction as a pirate, thinking it wasn't clear enough that she was one. Most thought of a more typical or classic pirate design seen in media, and didn't quite think Houndmaster was a good fit. In reality, she's pretty historically accurate in terms of her appearance and clothing. She's got the right accent too, and is overall depicted really well, I think. But as we've seen over the years, people's expectations matter. Take Skull Merchant, for example, a character who was teased largely with lots of mechanical and dark tones in her trailers. Many thought she was going to be a cyborg, and so they were disappointed with how she turned out. I think this is a similar case. One criticism I do agree with is that it's a little odd she has a dog as a power, but hey, Snug's a good boy, so who cares? The other core issue with Houndmaster, and the much bigger one, was her series of really bad bugs both in the PTB and on launch. Snug got stuck on almost everything, and often Houndmaster's power just didn't work essentially. It was very bad on launch, and whilst it has been slowly made better, it's still not great nowadays. Lore-wise, I think Houndmaster was actually really great, although maybe has a bit of an intimidating story, being the longest in length of any killers yet. Cosmetic-wise, I'd say she was very lacking as well, having one standout skin, which was the Ascended Rarity one, having a new dog skin. But even this felt overpriced, honestly, for what you got. This was about all that it changed. Taurie was the other part of this chapter, and again was highly requested, with her being a member of the Black Talon or the Black Veil. She's a freaky, weird survivor who actively wants to be a killer, and also tried to kill Hattie's brother in her lore. So why does no one play her despite her seeming so cool? I don't know. Well, if I have to give an answer, I'd say, whilst unique, she just isn't that appealing to most people to actually play. Her base design is very different to most survivors, with her having her cult robes and her cosmetic range amounting to recolors and just a handful of rarer outfits that play even harder into the cult theme. The only one that breaks the mold really is her casual look, and it's still an acquired taste. People generally pick a survivor based on their cosmetics and like for the character, so Taurie gets a little screwed over here and persistently has been, with her getting near to no cosmetics for the entire year since her release. Perk-wise, she did introduce the controversial Shoulder the Burden, but also came along with debatably the worst survivor perk in the game's history, no joke, Invocation Treacherous Crows, a perk that offers an awful effect in exchange for an entire health state, taken for the rest of the match. Her lore is also really great, so why isn't she popular? Well, I think it's as simple as, whilst most people find the character interesting, they don't have much interest in actually playing her, especially due to her lack of skins. So the failure of this chapter, I'd say, was mostly down to bugs, but also slightly off expectations, and 2 characters who really didn't receive much in the way of cosmetics, or more focus or content post-release. The lack of marketing also being a huge blow. It's a sad state for a chapter to fall to, but neither of these characters are played that frequently. This brings us up to Steady Pulse, a half chapter which only featured Orela Rose. This was debatably the highlight of originals over the past 2 years, and was able to deliver much more effectively than the 2 full chapters. I think partly because it's a half chapter, and generally people's expectations are set accordingly. We knew we were just getting a survivor here. Unlike the complete lack of marketing Houndmaster and Taurie received, Orela actually got quite a bit with a series of teasers featuring Orela's own voice, with her setting up a very mysterious situation, name-dropping lore characters like Cliff Barra. This felt like a huge step in the right direction after having literally nothing for Doomed Cause. Orela was also an important step for DBD in terms of representation, with her being the first original trans character. This was important and meant a lot to a lot of people. Behaviour also ran a charitable event for all sales made for some of Orela's cosmetics, raising upwards of $300,000. Orela's perks were a bit overblown on reveal, I think, in terms of people's reaction to them. Everyone really went overboard, in my opinion, in saying how powerful they were going to be, with them all being healing or altruism centric. None of them really ended up very good, I think, and have all fallen to the wayside in terms of their relevancy. I'd actually argue this is partly why Orela isn't played all that much anymore. She's far from being the least played, but via Nightlight she does sit at the bottom quarter of survivors in terms of pick rate. I think her perks just aren't that great or unique really. With a half chapter, you sort of need a big new mechanic, or something impactful with perks, like Michaela with boons. I think Orela's launch could have been a lot more impactful this way. Lore-wise, I'd say Orela's pretty good. She has a fairly unique story with her becoming a paramedic, and then pursuing a dream of running a haunted house. I do like how it ties in with the wider DBD world, something that feels sorely missed with the lack of original content over the years. So this was nice. Orela was overall a decent success, I'd say, although has still been somewhat forgotten, debatably. This brings us up to our final entry, Sinister Grace, a chapter featuring the Krasue and Vee Boonyasak. This chapter followed the lead of Orela's by actually having some marketing again, hooray, and slightly more extensive too, hinting toward what the chapter might be. This chapter also received hype in the way of the devs directly saying it was going to be the goriest chapter yet, and praising it a lot during the 9th year anniversary. Upon launch, this chapter was relatively underwhelming though, in my opinion. There was an initial wave of hype surrounding Krasue, as she was, as promised, very gory, and had a number of very grotesque animations. However, I sort of feel like this is where the chapter's offerings ended. The core issue with Krasue is her power, as it's sort of weirdly convoluted and quite confusing. It's the only power I've ever tested on the PTB, and didn't understand what it did the first game. The whole leeching mechanic is kind of bizarre, I think, and fairly clunky. Then the head form felt very stiff, and still sort of does. Krasue has a really odd power, and one that sort of speaks to the trajectory of powers in recent years. Many powers have become very overwhelming, I'd say, in their descriptions or breakdowns. It speaks to the bloat the game is having, with all of these overcomplicated powers. Krasue's other key issue, of course, was that she was very overpowered on her release, and I think this is largely why people actually bought her. She was really strong. Some said she was the strongest killer in the game for some time, and most put her at minimum in the top 3. Then she got nerfed, and now far less people play her, with her play rate dropping to a much more moderate level. Krasue, I think, is kind of dull beyond her visual flash. A character with a pretty clunky and unenjoyable power to face and play. It feels a lot like Sadako maybe to me. Really cool visuals and horror elements, but the gameplay just isn't there to support it. I also think her lore is really dull. I do appreciate the more pieceback style after how long Houndmaster's was, but it's so basic it feels almost like there's not much to read into at all. With tomes being almost entirely canned this year too, it seems unlikely we get an expansion of any kind to her story for quite some time. So she's just pretty basic from her lore perspective, to power, to cosmetics even, which she has a pretty simplistic and boring range of. We do have Vee though too in this chapter to come and save the day, debatably. She partly saves the day. Vee's more pieceback lore I actually think does work better. I think survivor stories do work better when they're shorter and more to the point. Killers I appreciate when there is more detail and more mystery to them, but for survivors I think it's fine if it's a bit more straightforward and simple. Vee has a nice visual design and has a decent cosmetic range, which I do think will expand with time, as she's already very popular. And debatably DBD's biggest win for originals as of recent, as people actually want to play her seemingly. It's been a little while now, and via Nightlight she's number 5 in pick rate, which is really good. Her perks are fairly mid though, although she did bring along a tambourine, which shouldn't be understated. I also appreciate how this chapter focused on Thai folklore, an unexplored area until now for DBD. Overall, I'd say this chapter was just sorta mid. It didn't necessarily have any problems aside Krasue's initial abundance of power. It's more just the lack of draw as a whole. There's a flatness to it almost. And I hate to say that because I really love original chapters and always look forward to them in a different way to licenses. What's been sad about the past few years for DBD is the feeling that original content is slowly being phased out of the game in some sense. If you look at our 5 originals since early 2024, all of them have been relatively abandoned, with them rarely receiving cosmetics or updates for the killers. The problem only compounds as well when you consider that original lore has also slowed exponentially this year, being completely cancelled for months on end. Rifts no longer feature tome lore, and even these are getting less content. What is happening to original content, and why does it feel like it's almost being phased out? Licensed content over this same period of time, I'd argue, has not had the same problems. We've gotten some of the most insane and visually detailed designs for licensed killers, such as Vecna, Dracula, Kaneki, and Springtrap. We've had highly detailed survivors too, with debatably the one flop being the Walking Dead chapter. Dead by Daylight has always struck a balance between originals and licenses because both are important to the longevity of the game, but also the heart of the game. DBD is what it is because of both of these things, yet it really feels like the quality and care has really been leaning more toward licenses over the past few years, with original content left to eat its dust a little bit. It's not to say there's been nothing good, because I don't think that's fair or true, but it has suffered undeniably. Comparing the quality of recent licensed content with the quality of original content, and the contrast is relatively stark. Upcoming content seems largely licensed heavy as well, with the January chapter being licensed, the March original Survivor being a bit up in the air with the current delays to content, and then the 10th year anniversary having a high likelihood to be a licensed chapter too. The original side of the game really feels like it's starving here, and even when we do get original content, it often has issues or bugs or just isn't given the attention it deserves. I really hope going into 2026 and the years after that this balance becomes a bit more balanced again. Original content is so important to the game, and I hope it gets some more of the spotlight again. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts as always down below. Thanks, and goodbye.